Olá, bem-vindos a uma edição especial do programa MOZEFO, diretamente a partir do coração do Parque Nacional da Gorongosa. Esta é uma das zonas mais ricas em biodiversidade em todo o mundo. O nosso convidado do programa de hoje é o dono da Fundação Gregory C. Carr. Ele tornou-se milionário antes de atingir os 30 anos e depois disso dedicou-se a diversas causas de filantropia. Desde 2004 tem dedicado uma grande parte do seu tempo e da sua fortuna ao esforço de conservação da Gorongosa. Vamos estar à conversa nesta hora com o Greg Carr. Mr. Carr, thank you so much for this unique opportunity.
Oh, thanks for having me. And I hope that you'll call me Greg. Everyone does.
If you insist, I'll do that.
Good.
Well, Greg, let's start off with a bit of information about you.
Okay.
Let's find out more about Greg Carr. As I mentioned earlier, you made a lot of money at a very early age, and then you gave it all away, or you started giving it away to different causes.
You know, in the 1980s in the United States, it seems like everybody was starting a computer company. It was the burst of the digital age, let's call it. And I was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is a town full of technology and smart people from MIT and Harvard, and we were young, and yeah, we started a computer company. And I think that timing was good, and maybe we had a little bit of luck, because the next 5 or 6 years was just an explosion, and we kind of rode that wave, and all of a sudden we had a big company.
So it was just timing and luck, no credit to you.
None whatsoever. You just got to be standing in the right place at the right time.
And grab the opportunity.
Grab the opportunity, work a little bit, and but seriously, it was a wonderful time in my life. I loved being part of a team, because we had a great team of people at Boston Technology, and different disciplines working together. There's the guys who write software, there's the guys who do the marketing, and there's the people who do the finance, and completely different mix of people, but with one goal. And so for 6 or 7 years of my life, that is all I did, 18 hours a day. And yeah, then we ultimately sold the company, and I thought, okay, now how am I ever going to have that much fun again? What am I going to do next? I need something big to challenge me. I want another team. What am I going to do?
But it's interesting because a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of businessmen, they're focused on making money, and when they make a lot of money, they want to make some more. But you turned to philanthropy. What made you turn to philanthropy?
It's a really interesting, I puzzle over that, because if you happen to make a lot of money in business, I don't fully understand the desire to then make twice as much, because really, how much can a single person spend? I mean, food costs the same, books cost the same. Why do you really, once you've bought a house, why do you really need to make a second fortune if you made a first fortune? And there's so much stress involved. And I said to myself in my 30s, that was super fun making a computer company, but I don't need two. And I spent several years thinking, well, what can I do that I will really, really love? And to answer that question, I thought back to my childhood.
And that was in Idaho.
I grew up in Idaho, which is a big, beautiful state in the Rocky Mountains with rivers and trees, very few people. It's a wilderness. We have national parks nearby, and I love the outdoors. And I thought to myself, could I spend the rest of my life doing something outdoors, but can I bring my business management skills? Can I be a philanthropist? Can I be somehow useful to other people? It's a mix of things, and I thought about it for years, and I wondered, what can I do?
So it's not that you became a conservationist after becoming a technology wizard. You were already a conservationist.
You've got it exactly right. I grew up loving the wilderness. I grew up outdoors, playing with rocks in a little stream. I think it's more unusual that I had a computer company in my 20s. That's not what you would have predicted from me. And but I wouldn't, I wouldn't say that my 30s were my happiest time of my life, because I would wake up in the morning wondering what's next. And I went on vacation. I went on safari to Africa once. That was in 2002, and I went to Victoria Falls. And I was floating down the Zambezi River, and there's elephants walking on the side, and there's baboons over here, and it's my first time. And there's a very funny thing that happens to people from all over the world who come to Africa. You feel this feeling of, oh, I feel at home here. This is where we all came from. And it was magnificent. It was beautiful.
There's a feeling of belonging, right?
I love Africa. Someone said to me the other day, they said, Greg, here's my philosophy. If you can only travel to 2 continents in your life, go to Africa twice.
I like that. But what is it, Greg, what is it about Africa? I mean, you mentioned that when people come here, they feel like they've come home. Yeah. But they don't know that before coming. So what do you think draws so many tourists from Europe and the US?
I wonder. But when you're looking out across Africa, you see as they call it, the megafauna. You see elephants, you see lions, you see hippos, you see a giraffe, you see zebras, you see wildebeest. And those are the species. Here's what I think. As human beings, we evolved here in Africa. We're right in the Great Rift where we sit now, where human beings evolved. We grew up, so to speak, as a species over the past 1,000,000 years with all of these grand animals, and not just the big ones, the little ones, the little birds that we can hear right now.
The ants that Edward Wilson mentions in his book,
ants.
A Window on Eternity. Right?
This book about Gorongosa Park, the reason he called it A Janela para a Eternidade is that when you're in Gorongosa Park, you can see all the way into the past of where we came from as a species. Also, if we protect Gorongosa, you can see into the future what we might preserve. So that's why he called it A Janela para a Eternidade.
Is that why Gorongosa is so important, not just for Mozambique, but
I think so.
The whole world?
I think so. I think that this is our cradle of our species. And in fact, it probably looks very similar now as it looked 200,000 years ago when the very first Homo sapiens were walking around here. And when I say it looks very similar, I mean the same tree species, the same animal species. That's why I think we feel at home here. This is our natural habitat. It's in our DNA. And this bird we can hear right now, it's deep in our DNA that we're supposed to be hearing that bird.
I can see you're passionate about this. And so in your 30s, you're asking yourself, what next? Yeah. And then in 2004, you come to Gorongosa. Did you find your answer then?
I was so lucky. Once again, luck played a role. I met a man in New York City named Carlos dos Santos.
Oh, okay.
He's a very famous Mozambican ambassador.
He's in London now, I believe. He's the High Commissioner.
Right. He is a diplomat. He's intelligent. And he said to me, Greg, you're looking for a new project. Come to Mozambique. We would love to have you. And it was so important to get that warm invitation. You wouldn't want to show up somewhere uninvited, so to speak.
Sure.
But I came here and Ambassador dos Santos introduced me to President Chissano. He introduced me to other ministers. And there was a general warm feeling. This was in 2002, actually. And they all said, Greg, you want to do philanthropy? That's wonderful. Let's do some philanthropy together. But then I had to go through this question of what will I do? That took me 2 years, from 2002 to 2004, back in Boston again, thinking, how can I possibly be helpful to Mozambique? What does Mozambique want to do? And that was a real process.
But But why here? I mean, I understand that you got an invitation. I understand you had that feeling of being welcome, but why here?
I had had the opportunity to travel in quite a few African countries. I had been to West Africa. I'd been around a little bit, and when I came to Mozambique, I felt the warmth of the Mozambican people. And you know, I think they used to call Mozambicans, I think they used to say Mozambique is the land of the good people. And they are wonderful. They've got big hearts. They got a great sense of humor. And I connected with Mozambicans, but also I connected with Mozambique. On that first reconnaissance trip in 2002, I flew up and down the country, all the way, you know, from Pemba to the Maputo Elephant Reserve. I looked at things. I still hadn't actually heard of Gorongosa at that time, but I fell in love with the beauty. And then I went home to Boston and I did a lot of research, and I said to myself, okay, if I'm going to go to Mozambique and we're going to do a project, what would be useful? And I thought to myself, sort of, let's say with the business mindset, what's the competitive advantage of Mozambique? You know, that's what business people say to themselves. Why would we win, so to speak? I said, well, the competitive advantage of Mozambique is its beauty and its wonderful people. And so I started thinking, well, why doesn't Mozambique have a multi-billion-dollar tourism industry and safari tourism industry? That's what Kenya has, and Tanzania has, and South Africa has, and Botswana has. And I did some more research, and then I read and learned and heard about this national park called Gorongosa. And the more I learned, the more enthused I became, because I realized that in the 60s, in the 1960s and part of the 1970s, Gorongosa was one of the best national parks in all of Africa. And it was chock full of visitors from around the world, and those visitors brought a lot of economic activity. In fact, Gorongosa National Park was the economic engine for the center of this country. So as a business person, I thought, that's interesting. And so two threads came together in my life: my love of wilderness, my love of national parks, but my desire to use my business skills to help Mozambique.
And I mean, besides the beauty, there was also a lot of poverty. So did you feel that the tourism industry
Yes.
could contribute to that, to the effort of eradicating poverty?
Absolutely. I became intrigued with this notion of, can a national park do two things at once? One, can it protect the biodiversity? Two, can the national park actually be a human development engine? I just love national parks, because think about what it takes to run a national park. First of all, you need rangers. We have 140 rangers here. Being a ranger is a good job. You need education, you need training, you need to be a problem solver. Those are good jobs. What else do you need in a national park? You need people who do forestry, because we do a lot of reforestation. That's another knowledge position. You need scientists. Here in Gorongosa Park, we created a biodiversity laboratory that's one of the best on the continent of Africa. These are ecologists and these are wildlife biologists. They study Gorongosa so we can understand this ecosystem, but at the same time, we're training young Mozambicans to be scientists, to be biologists, to be ecologists. So this national park is creating a generation of young Mozambican scientists, and let me also note, women and men. We have a lot of young women going into science here. But what else is a national park good at? Well, the obvious one is tourism, and ecotourism creates a lot of jobs. I like ecotourism because it's sustainable, it can be green, it can do it forever. I like the fact that it creates jobs that are knowledge-based, and there's opportunities for advancement in the tourism industry. But what else does a national park do? Well, National parks manage a landscape. And a landscape is not just the actual physical border of the park. It's the greater area. Because where does the water from Gorongosa come from? It comes from rivers outside the park. And there's a lot of movement of animals inside and outside a park. So one has to think of an entire landscape when one manages a national park, which means we don't just focus on the 400,000 hectares of the park, we also focus on an even bigger area, 600,000 hectares, known as the Zona Tempao, or the buffer zone, around Gorongosa Park, where 200,000 humans live. And let's face it, these are some very poor people. They're poor because of the previous civil conflict. Most of them are farmers, and we help them with their farms. So Gorongosa National Park has an agricultural department. And maybe some people would think, oh, I didn't know national parks had agricultural departments. But we're outside the park boundaries helping farm families with their traditional crops like maize and vegetables and legumes, but also with cash crops. And if you think about it, if a family outside this park is doing much better with its farm, then they don't need to poach the animals. They don't need to expand their park, expand their farm into the park. So it's a conservation strategy to help farmers, and it's a human development strategy.
Well, that's a very important topic, community engagement and poaching in particular. But before we go there, I mean, you mentioned the impact and how the national park reverts to the development and contributes to the development of, you know, the entire community. That implies that you need to engage a lot of different stakeholders. It's not just you on your own to make it work. So how does how do you make it work?
So national parks are an important symbol of any country. And Gorongosa is a treasure of Mozambique. It's a symbol of Mozambique. It's part of the national sovereignty, the national patrimony. So I'm here as a guest. I'm always aware of the fact that I'm here by invitation. This national park fits in the governance of this country, going straight up through the ministry to the president. I'm in something that we call a public-private partnership. So the ownership of this park didn't change, the sovereignty of this nation didn't change. I'm here for 20 years in a public-private partnership, working closely with the government of Mozambique, closely with our warden, Mateus Matemba, who's amazing. And Mateus and I are what you'd think of as this public-private partnership. And we bring a little bit of international ideas here, but 97% of our employees are Mozambican. So, and we have 400 employees.
I was going to ask how many, right.
And so this is largely a Mozambican effort, but you do want to connect to the outside world. Why do you want to connect Gorongosa Park to the outside world? Well, for tourists, for scientists, for publicity. National Geographic comes here and makes films. So there's things that I can do with my international connections that are useful, but the heart of our team is Mozambican.
Great. And Greg, it's been 10 years now, just over 10 years since you first came here. In 2005, you signed the MOU with the Mozambican government. How much do you feel that you have achieved so far? What are your indicators?
I'm really thrilled with how it's going. And when I first came here, I could drive all day long, and maybe you would see one warthog or one baboon or something. Now there were other animals here, but they were really scared of people, and they were hiding.
Just for the purpose of context, sorry to interrupt you, Greg. I read here in Edward Wilson's book that, I mean, the war, as you mentioned earlier, the Civil War, it took a huge toll on the wildlife, and He says here that between 1972 and 2001, the number of Cape buffaloes counted in the park fell from 13,000 to just 15.
Wow.
The wild beasts fell from 6,400 to 1. Hippos went from 3,500 to 44.
Wow.
And instead of 3,300 zebras, there were 12.
That's
And
like
to mention-
99% loss in many of those cases.
Not to mention the elephants and lions.
Yeah.
That's what you
Well,
found.
when I first came here, we looked and looked and looked for lions, and over a period of about the first 3 years, we found 5 lions. And Gorongosa used to have anywhere from 200 to 300 lions at least. So we all know that there was a generation of civil conflict in this country, and there was commercial hunting, exploitation really of this park in the 90s. Even after peace agreements were signed, there was exploitation going on. So the animal population was decimated, and what I'm excited about now, so here we are in 2015, and we recently did an animal census, our scientists did. They did it from the air. They flew in a helicopter, and they flew very carefully, and think of it like flying in strips over the center of the park. They counted 72,000 animals from the air.
Wow.
And you're not going to see every
And
animal
that
from the
doesn't-
air.
That doesn't include the ants.
Does not include, it probably doesn't even include some of the elephants if they're hiding under a tree. But what they counted was 500 elephants, 600 buffalo, 700 sable antelope. Those are those beautiful ones with the horns that go back. 1,200 kudu. Kudu are the ones with the big curly horns. Thousands of other antelope. And the lions, we now know we have more than 50, probably more than 60 lions. So that's at least a 10-fold increase. And what I'm excited about is that if you give nature a chance, it will bounce back. Nature is resilient. This ecosystem is rich, it's abundant, and if humans stop causing trouble, Gorongosa National Park all by itself will rebound, and that's happening.
Let's come back to that, Greg, in the second half of this interview. So if humans stop causing trouble, we'll come back to that in the second half of this interview. Voltamos dentro de instantes, não saia do seu lugar. Estamos de volta para a segunda parte desta entrevista com Greg Carr, o filantropo norte-americano que tem apoiado o esforço de conservação do Parque Nacional da Gorongosa. Greg, just earlier you said something about humans causing trouble. What do you mean by that?
Well, unfortunately, across all of planet Earth, this century, we've got a scary situation going on because human beings in every country of this world are expanding their cities, expanding their farms, and wilderness is disappearing. And when wilderness disappears, whatever species lives there, that habitat, lives in that habitat, goes away. And if that's the only habitat where that particular species lives, then it goes extinct. And we are in jeopardy this century due to climate change, due to pollution, due to habitat loss, due to overhunting. We are in jeopardy this century of losing 30 to 50% of the species on this planet.
And we have evidence of that in Gorongosa before.
In the case of Gorongosa, during the last generation, the problem was what we call overharvesting, as in professional hunters just killing everything. Mm-hmm. But the risks are not over for Gorongosa. Going forward, the next 100 years, we need to protect the 400,000 hectares of this national park. And what that means is that the human beings who live outside this park need to have healthy, happy, economically viable, sustainable lives so that they don't need to come inside the park and poach, so they don't need to come inside the park and start farms.
So you told us earlier about all the progress that the park and the restoration project has made so far. Would you say that those are your biggest threats, or the biggest threats to the park and the restoration project?
I think for the next 20 years, we'll do, at the Gorongosa Restoration Project, which is our public-private partnership with the government, we'll probably do more of our important work outside the park than we will inside the park. Our farming programs, our education, our schools, helping the people who live around Gorongosa to do better so they don't need to consume the resources of the park itself.
When you say consume the resources, can you be a bit more specific?
Well,
what is happening?
Sadly, we still have a lot of people that come into this park and they set snares, little wire snares and traps that go like that. And what's really unfortunate about a snare or a trap is that it's indiscriminate. You know, they may think, well, I want to catch a warthog and eat it. Yeah, well, you could catch a lion. We've had baby elephants lose their noses in snares. And we collect thousands and thousands of snares from around this park. Our rangers do. But wouldn't it be better if those same people that came in here to set a snare were back home on the farm and their farm was successful and productive and they were making a lot more money and they didn't have to engage in the dangerous work at night walking through a national park? I mean, they could be eaten by a crocodile. I mean, seriously.
So the poaching that goes on here is not necessarily for the horns, but for meat.
It's what they call the Bushmeat Trade. And it's guys that come in here and they want to catch animals and they dry it, then they want to go sell it in the city. And you know, the truth of the matter is, for the most part, it's not as if they're catching some food and then running straight home for the family. They're actually drying the meat and selling it in the city just to get things they want. And it'd be better if these men who poached were home helping their wife on the farm. And we need to help them with their farms, and we do that.
So you are trying to show the community that there are alternatives, as you said, that are economically viable and that can generate income for the family.
There's
for the house.
tremendous
Can you give us
opportunities.
a few examples?
Well,
of that?
I'm incredibly excited about our coffee project.
You're actually growing coffee in Gorongosa.
Mount Gorongosa goes up to 1,800 meters, and the best coffee in the world is what's known as Arabica coffee, because it grows very high up. So there's only one or two places in all of Mozambique that you even could grow this, because it's high altitude.
So it wasn't grown here before. This is something new.
This is our project. It's part of the Gorongosa Restoration Project. We can help 1,000 families on Mount Gorongosa all have their own coffee farm. And here's what I love about it. Okay, first, you're creating great jobs for these families. Second, this is an export product for Mozambique. That's good for the economy of the whole country. Third, you're actually saving a rainforest, because these same farmers who might otherwise cut trees to make a maize farm or a potato farm are now growing trees. And they aren't just growing coffee trees, they're growing native rainforest trees, because the best coffee grows in the shade, so you actually grow it with native rainforest. So now, these people on Mount Gorongosa are getting an income, they're growing trees, and the water catchment of the park, which is 3 rivers that come from that mountain into the park, will now be protected. I just couldn't be more excited about it, and I'm wondering if you would like to have a cup of Gorongosa coffee with me.
I would love to try some.
May I pour you some?
Is it in the market yet?
Well, you're going to be one of the first people to taste this.
I feel honored.
Because it's new, and we are just getting our first
Will you have some as
sample.
well?
I would love to. You're going to notice that it's rich, deep flavor. Take a smell. And
Cheers.
Cheers to Gorongosa.
Cheers to
Café de Gorongosa. What do you think?
It's very tasty.
It's really...
Just the idea that it was grown in the mountains and...
It's a rich, deep flavor. It's saving a rainforest, and it's helping some of the poorest families of Mozambique. I am so excited. We won't be ready until next year to have enough volume to really start selling it, but you're going to see this in Maputo shops. You're going to see this in Maputo restaurants. And
I have to say I am a tea person, but that could just make me turn to coffee.
This could switch you. Well, I'm glad.
And thank you for that. So it's interesting how you are turning the community into Gorongosa's allies, or the they're becoming conservationists. But that's a huge challenge, I would say, because it's not just changing livelihoods, it's also changing mindsets, isn't it?
You know, this is the big challenge for the world. Human beings need nature. I mean, what do we get from nature? We get our food, we get our fuel, we get our fiber to make clothing, we get our medicine. You know that about 50% of all medicines were discovered in a tropical forest. What else do ecosystems do for us? They clean our water, they clean our air, they cycle nutrients. Farms only work when you have a healthy ecosystem. Honeybees from Gorongosa Park pollinate the farms next to Gorongosa Park. So we humans need nature. And if we don't protect it, and if we see the forests and the animals of this planet disappear, guess what? Our own human economy is going to go with it. We're together with them. So we need a sustainable way of living throughout all of planet Earth, not just here in Mozambique. We need a sustainable way of life where what we consume from the earth, we give back to the earth. I hope that Gorongosa, and let's call it the greater Gorongosa ecosystem, the park and the human beings that live around it, can be a model of an equilibrium of humans and nature living in harmony, living sustainably. We're going to spend the rest of our lives, when I say we, I mean the team here at Gorongosa, working on that model.
But when it comes to the community and the transformation that's taking place, you can't really measure that, can you? Because, I mean, you can measure the number of animals, you can measure the revenue from the tourism industry. Yeah. What signs do you see of the transformation going on in people's minds, and the children, for example?
There are things that we can measure, and your question is a good one. There's something that people call the Human Development Index. And it's a way of measuring the lives of human beings. How much education do they have? What is their nutrition? What is their health care? We also have a health care program at Gorongosa. It's a pretty unusual national park that has a health care system, but we go with mobile clinics and community health workers around into the neighborhoods. So what can we measure? Well, the number of babies that are born safely and mothers who are healthy after the birth, because giving birth is just about the most dangerous thing that a human being does.
So Mozambique has one of the highest infant and maternal mortality rates.
Right around Gorongosa Park, we have brought that figure way down. And we have what are called traditional birth assistants, matronas, that help the people. And we have what are called APAs, community health workers, that are working with the people around the park. So there's things we can measure. There's a lot of healthcare statistics you can measure. You can measure education. There's 70 primary schools now around Gorongosa Park. When I first came here, there were a handful. You can measure the yield of farms. We can increase the yield on a farm 5 times. I'm talking about the traditional yield of maize and legumes and things like that with fertilizer, a little bit of fertilizer, not too much, with better seeds, but with better farming methods. So I'm fully convinced, and I think the evidence is already there, that this national park will raise the Human Development Index of the neighbors, the humans next door.
But that doesn't really, I mean, that's very important, but it still doesn't show the transformation in people's minds. Would you be devastated, for example, one day to see a child or someone that came from one of Gorongosa's schools become a commercial hunter tomorrow?
Well, that's a very interesting point you make. Gorongosa Park belongs to the Mozambican people. It's their park. That's what I love about a national park. It's the most democratic institution you can think of. And we take 4,000 children from the local communities around the park into the park each year. We let them go on safari. They spend several days here. They learn about the park. They have some fun. They learn a conservation lesson. they go home with a new perspective. We also go into these schools. I mentioned 70 primary schools around Gorongosa Park. We go into those schools with our conservation education team. So I think we're changing the minds of people. This past week, we had Lion Days, because it was World Lion Day a few days ago. And we spent several days with youngsters in the park learning about lions. So I do believe that we're changing the mindset. I think this next generation coming along is looking at this national park and saying, wow, I'm proud of it as a Mozambican. It's a tesoro del mundo. And they're saying, you know, I might get a job there, or they might help me with my farm. And gradually, I think we're developing a wonderful relationship between the park and the people.
Great. Now, Greg, there's something that we need to talk about. There is a very imminent threat to Gorongosa and to the restoration project, and it shows in the numbers that tourism has fallen in recent years, due mostly to the political tension.
That's right.
How has that affected the park?
Well, think about how unfortunate this is for Mozambique, because we were saying earlier in this conversation, tourism should be a multi-billion-dollar industry, sustainable industry, a knowledge industry for Mozambique. You know that in South Africa, tourism is a $60 billion annual industry. Similarly, big numbers in Kenya and Tanzania. In Mozambique, tourism should be one of the largest sectors.
Why is it not?
People are not going to come here from Europe and from the United States and from Asia and spend their money if they're nervous. When someone goes a long way away on vacation, they need to feel safe. And Mozambique needs to have civil peace. The past couple of years, we all know that there was civil conflict once again.
And this area in particular is
we are right in the middle of some of it, and we need peace. And you know, that will benefit everybody. Everybody benefits from peace. And I hope it's coming. I know that everybody's still talking. I hope those talks are fruitful, because we had more tourists here 3 years ago than this year. The last couple of years, it went...
So you did feel it?
It went, right down. Oh, it went right down. And you know, every tourist that comes here is helping to create a job for a young Mozambican. Think about that. And there's a lot of things that we can do in this country, what they call structurally, to make tourism easier.
But how did you feel when that happened? I mean, you have invested so much here. Over $40 million we hear. I mean, that's not the full investment. Obviously, there's other partners, but you have invested so much, not just your money, but your passion and your energy. How did that make you feel, the prospect of going backwards?
Well, you're right that there are multiple partners. The U.S. government has been wonderful. USAID helps us. Irish Aid. The government of Portugal helps us. The Mozambican government has been a fabulous partner. So there's a lot of teammates here. And but for me, the sadness is seeing the people who live next door to this park go down in their opportunities if civil conflict returns. We could create thousands of jobs in tourism over the next 10, 20 years, but we're not going to do that if people are afraid to come to Mozambique. So we need peace. I hope we're moving to a very long-term, peaceful, stable situation. I don't think there's a more beautiful country in all of Africa than Mozambique.
I would have to agree with you on that.
So let's use that beauty to make economic development that's sustainable, that helps the most vulnerable people of Mozambique.
Did you at any point feel that I can't do this anymore?
Oh, I've never thought that for a second. No, I'm doing this for the rest of my...
Even with the numbers going down and the prospect of war returning.
I'm doing this for the rest of my life, but it's not just me. My whole team is committed for all the rest of our lives. This is what we do. It's not a job, it's a mission, it's a lifestyle. If you haven't interviewed him or met him yet, you've got to spend some time with our very brilliant and charismatic park warden, Mateus Matemba.
He's a speaker at our conference in a few days.
Well, good, because he's far more articulate than I am, and I don't just mean his Portuguese. He understands the connection between the park and the people. Before he became the park warden, he was the director of our community relations department that did all this human development. And so you ask me, did I ever feel about stopping? Never, but nobody on our team would stop. We're a group of people dedicated to making this work.
I heard you say, I'll do this forever. I'm going to do this for the rest of my lifetime. Because I did mean to ask you, for how long will you support Gorongosa? And I hope it's not uncomfortable, but I have to say, what if Greg Carr disappears? What happens to Gorongosa?
Some crocodile will be very happy, probably, if he's the one that grabs me. But no, our system is resilient. Our management team is amazing. We've got multiple financial partners. I mentioned some of them a minute ago. The tourism industry itself funds this park.
You have the recently created Gorongosa Club.
I think you could feed me to the lions right now. And everything,
don't give me any ideas.
And everything would go just fine. But seriously, we have so many friends. We did just create something we call the Gorongosa Business Club. We have about 19 members right now. It's some of the most prestigious, successful private sector corporations in this country. And the Gorongosa Business Club is a group of enterprises that all pay $25,000 a year to help the park, and in return we try to give them a little bit of fun, and they come here as tourists, and it's a wonderful relationship.
And I do have to say that Soiko is also a part of that
club.
Oh,
thank you for that. Your very own television production company is part of that. We're grateful for that. And we have 19 members now. We're going to try to get 30. So if you're listening, you better sign up quick, because there's only 11 more spots available. But
once in a lifetime opportunity.
But we need lots and lots and lots of friends, and the good news is we have them. And the Mozambican ministers, the Mozambican president, have all been outstanding. There's a wonderful man you may know named Dr. Soto, who's the head of the National Administration of Conservation
He's
Areas.
actually also a speaker at our conference.
Well,
so
you're
thank
so
you,
far
Greg.
ahead of me.
O Greg Carr está a ajudar-nos aqui na promoção, sem saber, da próxima conferência do MOZEFO, nos dias 20 e 21 de agosto. Vamos discutir os desafios do turismo em Moçambique e falar dos temas crescimento, inovação e diversificação. Sorry for that.
Well, Dr. Soto is a tremendous ally and friend and supporter of this park. He was just here last week. Minister Celso Correia has been a wonderful supporter. I met with him, and he said to me, Greg, I love Gorongosa Park. So we got a lot of friends. And
that's where your sustainability comes from this network of partners. And because, sometimes philanthropy is understood as just, giving your money away and supporting causes and injecting funds. Is that how you see it? Or
sometimes I don't even think of myself as a philanthropist. I think of myself much more as a teammate in creating a sustainable national park. So it's a little bit more of a business activity, actually. The tourism here will pay the budget of the park. The coffee project is going to help pay the budget of the park, because profits from that will go back into the park. So look, 10 years from now, wouldn't it be wonderful if the park didn't need any donors or philanthropists, because it was self-sustaining? Or maybe it's 15 years, but that's a good goal. So I think I'm more enthused about bringing business management experience to this than being let's say, a passive philanthropist or something.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you so much for
Wow.
this fantastic opportunity. Just before we wrap up, I would like to ask you, when tourists come here, they spend a few days, maybe a week, what do they take back with them?
Wow, we've had 13 tourists here all week from the United States, and almost every night at dinner I've chatted with a few of them, and most of them are saying it's the experience of their lifetime. They love it. It brings you peace, it brings you adventure, but I think it gives you a different sense of your place as a human being on this planet to be in such a magnificent ecosystem. I think any tourist can come here and have their life changed for the better.
And Gorongosa's life will change in the process.
I think estamos a ganhar.
Greg, muito obrigada.
Estamos juntos.
E obrigada a si que nos acompanhou nesta edição especial do programa MOZEFO, diretamente a partir do coração do Parque Nacional da Gorongosa. Continue na nossa companhia aqui na STV.